In response to a world so often divided, violent, and broken, we gather to restore our sense of humanity, to assemble fragments of hope, to take strength in the search for truth and meaning, to meet the moral challenges presented by the crises of the moment. We pause on the edge of an invitation to a deeper way of living, courageous, awake, aware, even when it hurts. Here, may we find more capacity for compassion and glimpse the good that may yet be.
My Easy God is Gone by James Kavanaugh. Very good. I have lost my easy God, the one whose name I knew since childhood. I knew his temper, his sullen outrage, his ritual forgiveness. I knew the strength of his arm, the sound of his insistent voice, his beard bristling, his lips full and red with moisture at the mustache, his eyes clear and piercing, too blue to understand all, his face too unwrinkled to feel my child's pain. He was a good God, so he told me, a long-suffering and manageable one. I knelt at his feet and kissed them. I felt the smooth countenance of his forgiveness. I never told him how he frightened me, how he followed me as a child when I played with friends or begged for candy on Halloween. He was a predictable God. I was the unpredictable one. He was unchanging, omnipotent, all-seeing. I was volatile and helpless. He taught me to thank him for the concern which gave me no chance to breathe, for the love which demanded only love in return and obedience. He made pain sensible and patience possible and the future foreseeable. He, the mysterious, took all mystery away, corroded my imagination, controlled the stars, and would not let them speak for themselves. Now he haunts me seldom. Some fierce umbilical is broken. I live with my own fragile hopes and sudden rising despair. Now I do not weep for my sins. I have learned to love them and to know that they are the wounds that make love real. His face eludes me. His voice, with all its pity, does not ring in my ear. His maxims, memorized in boyhood, do not make fruitless and pointless my experience. I walk alone, but not so terrified as when he held my hand.
This reading is by Ann Field, who is a UU religious educator. God is the word I use to allude to that source of wonder and mystery that I experience when I contemplate the fact of my existence. As I consider the sweep of cosmic evolution, that incredible story of inert matter giving rise to living, feeling, thinking, dreaming creatures, I have a sense of spiritual reality that is always surging onward and outward. This is the process that I call God, the spiritual evolution of the cosmos, creation flowing free. I have difficulty using God as a noun, for a noun must point to something, a person, place, or thing, or so I was taught. To me, God is a verb. To use a metaphor of punctuation, God is not a period, but a question mark or an exclamation point. God is not the answer to the mystery of life, but the acknowledgement of the mystery. God is, in the words of Samuel Longfellow, the life that maketh all things new. When I recognize the presence of God working through me, I live with a sense of high adventure and internal significance.
There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy
Well, this is the final of our Losing and Finding My Religion series, which we began a few weeks ago. And my conversation partner this morning is Francene Amari-Faulkner. She is a member of our Board of Trustees this year. She has been a member of the choir for a while. She has a background in Unitarian Universalist life in the Unitarian Universalist Church of Concord, which you will hear about. And she is a very passionate animal advocate and activist and a resident of Nahant. So I'm really grateful that you have agreed to be in conversation and dialogue this morning on God concepts, or as we also advertised it earlier this week, the God neither of us believes in. And so we are doing some deconstructing and constructing of that word God. And I wanted to start with you. I want to start with you. No, I'm kidding. I wanted to start by really what prompted me to ask you to join me in a dialogue was we were at a board retreat in the summer. And it just so happened that we mentioned the covenant that we have often used in this congregation. In fact, it's been used for a number of years. And it goes like this. So, well, we'll just say it, right? You don't have to say it, because I know. So, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth, its sacrament, and service, its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. And Francene, you just did, it was sort of an offhand comment, but it was passionate. And you said, that covenant, that affirmation, it bugs me. There's 2 words in there. There's 2 phrases. And I said, oh, well, tell me about it. You know, which ones? So tell me what you said.
I said to serve human need, it should be living need, because it's not just human need. And to serve God. I have a real problem with the word God.
Right.
And I can explain why.
Yeah, so what you said at the time, no, and I'm going to tell you a couple of moments in that covenant that actually, like, I also found difficult. One is love is the doctrine, because we don't have a doctrine in the Unitarian Universalist faith. So I always wanted to say, like, love is our doctrine. You know, in other words, kind of highlighting that we're making a play on the fact that we don't have it's not a doctrinal faith. So the other word is sacrament, because I do believe that the word sacrament is really mysterious to people and they don't know what it means. So those are just some of the thoughts I've had along the way. Well, Sarah jumped in, Cecil jumped in, and she said, we never voted on that as our covenant. That was just one that the former minister really liked, and we've used it for a long time. But it's not like it's something that, you know, we officially adopted. I said, that's really interesting. So that gives us permission to try some other ones. And that just opened up a lot of curiosity, and I wanted to ask you, because as we are dealing with the losing my religion and finding my religion topic, tell me about some of the history of why the word and the concept of God, as you received it, harmed you.
okay?
Yeah.
My past is kind of loaded. I grew up in a Catholic church, very strict Catholic school. Somebody nodding their head. And I had nuns from the first grade on. And this is a whole part of the Catholic Church that hasn't even come out yet. And these nuns were, well, what did they do with women back then that they couldn't marry off or they didn't know what to do with? They put them in the nunnery. And then they put them with the kids. So I had nuns who were mentally off. They were not whole beings. And so in first grade, I'll just launch right in.
Go
Is
right
that
ahead.
okay?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
I was kind of a rambunctious kid, and so they would pick off certain ones, and because what they were trying to do was control you, and how they did it was they would try to break your spirit. And this is, I'll tie this back to the animal stuff, why I so get breaking an animal on a different level. But anyway, so in first grade, I was kind of rambunctious, and so they would do things like, okay, they'd come in with a thing of crushed hot pepper one day and say, okay, we're gonna, if anybody talks, we're gonna pour it in your mouth. It's gonna burn a hole through your tongue and you'll never speak again. So, okay, so who gets made the example but me? I get called up to the front of the classroom. They pour it in your mouth. You had to hold it there while, they're making an example of you. Meanwhile, you're thinking, okay, I'm protecting everybody else from getting this. I'm like saving everyone. I can take it. I can take it. Go back to your desk, spit it in the ruler tray, and then can I talk? I don't know if I can talk till recess because I didn't have an opportunity to talk again. So, okay, that was but this is God. Okay, they're trying to break you. Another thing they did, again about talking, called me up the front of the classroom, put my tongue between a pair of scissors. I'm not kidding. Said, we're gonna cut it off if you talk. This is the gross glue scissors, with the old glue on it. Who would do this to a 6-year-old kid? So this was God. This was like how so I had a really, it's kind of a screwed up beginning of, this was the foundation of how things, meanwhile, a lot of kids, not a lot of kids, but the ones that they sort of singled out, one girl committed suicide at 18, another kid had a drug problem, another guy, massive stroke at like 45. These people all became damaged over time because they tried to break our spirits. Again, it was to control. So I want to bring it to the animal piece. So I've always been an animal person, but when when they try to train elephants and dolphin and orcas and can break a horse, it affects me on such a deep level because I get it. I know what they were trying to do. Luckily, I came from a really good family. I had a great home life. So when I came home, everything was good in my house, but some of these other kids, it wasn't, So what did they have? Anyway, it's not all about trauma, but so God, you had to suffer to have happiness or to feel good about something. You had to be suffering, and it's twisted, it's taken a long time to kind of understand, and there's a part of you that you don't really even admit what went on until you get older, because then it means they got you, but so God, I always had, once I got through Catholic high school, I never wanted anything to do with organized religion. God is patriarchal, it's male, it's the priesthood and all that stuff's at the top, then come the men, then come the women, then come the kids, then come the animals. It's like you don't have any value. Mm-hmm. I can't live like that. I can't. I tend to be reactive about God,
Yeah, so you have been a survivor of serious spiritual and religious abuse.
Yep, it was not safe.
It was not safe, and people who supposedly represented the highest reality in which we live and move and have our being were cruel, were sick,
Yep.
were
Mean-spirited.
sadistic.
Sadistic, yep.
And so some of that's about power that they felt was vested in them as representatives of Holy Mother Church. And religious and spiritual abuse can happen in any religious tradition. It just looks different depending on where that may happen. And you survived it, and one of the things that, when you talk about animals, that is also a point of doctrine in some church traditions, which is that God gave creation, created human beings to have dominion over all the created world, including animals. And so, Francene, you had an instinct, an inherent instinct, that that is not true. You have a creationist spirituality, which sees divine energy moving throughout all creation, including in animals who have souls, and the right to be free and to live safely, just as you had the right to think for yourself, to live freely, to speak freely, to be a creative, wonderful child that you were. So, that said, you moved on, and you could have completely disengaged from all religious and spiritual community forever, but you didn't, and so something happened. A Swedenborgian friend.
Oh, when I went to college, I went to UC Berkeley, and I had the incredible fortune.
Want to kind of put that up a little bit.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
I lived in the Berkeley Hills with a woman named Margit Tobish, and she was married to a Swedenborg minister who had since passed. And I think she started off as a Unitarian, and she was from Budapest. And I think she had actually rejected her religion at one point and then ended up marrying a minister. And she sort of got me into a different direction where it was just this wisdom of how to grow old and how to live in the world. She was amazing. I was so lucky to have her in my life. And then when I ended up moving back here, and I had kids, and I was married, and is it okay to go in this direction? This is
Sure,
how I
yeah,
ended up
yeah,
at the UU
yeah.
church. So my kids would go to visit the grandparents, and they were horrified that I wasn't doing anything. We weren't going to do anything religious. They'd come home, and they'd know how to say a Hail Mary or an Our Father. I was like, oh my God, the last thing I would have ever done is subject my kids to organized religion or the Catholic Church. So we got to do something, and we were living in Concord, and they had a really great UU program. They had a great program, teaching all kinds of religions. So my kids went there, and I was taking them there, and then I got pulled in and did spiritual autobiography and learned more and got involved in like some Wiccan stuff and all kinds of things, some Buddhism and all the different aspects of different religions. And one of the things, at one point I took a class in Kabbalah, and one of the fascinating things was, and I think this is, because I vacillate, I go from thinking there's something to thinking there's nothing, but then I get pulled in again when like some sort of amazing synchronicity happens that you just can't explain. And I think, yeah, there's more to this. And some of how Kabbalah or other religions talk about it is like when you think of an atom and you've got the proton, the neutron, there's space in between those. And even though we don't see it, there's something there. But we only get like 2%. But there's the other 98%. I may not have the numbers exactly. So I really think there's something to that. There's so much of it we just don't get. But should I talk about my dog?
Not yet.
Okay.
So we're sharing a history here, and again, we all have histories, and some of you have wonderful experiences with a Catholic or a conservative upbringing. It's just everybody's different, but we're just examining how we are sitting next to each other in a pluralistic theological community, and each one of us is really bringing their own history and their own experience. And one of the things you talked about is, I asked you, I said, when you moved away from that God, you absolutely said, that's crazy, I'm sick, I'm not going to. I asked you if you had any God image that you might, or image of the divine or the holy when you were younger that comforted you or that sustained you, that was sort of like a response to that judging, terrible, abusive God that you got in your upbringing. And you said no, but you did develop, and this is where we can talk about your dog, you did develop a sense of the mystery and a sense of reverence. And we talked about love. We were talking about, like, what names do we use to describe that ultimate mystery that we know is greater than, you know, the sort of smallness and limited nature and individual experience that we're having. And Francine used the word love, and I thought about that beautiful lyric by John Lennon that's sort of one of my nicknames for God, which is limitless, undying love that shines around me like a million suns and calls me on and on across the universe. That's one of my phrases, and the other one by Barbara Pescan is, she says, the unnameable magnificent intensity, which I love. And you talked about love, which you embraced as like, this is the holy thing, and this is the ultimate reality. And you explained something about how that works for you, about actively loving. And yes, please tell that story.
Right, so I guess I'm thinking back to 6th grade too, about, you know, I think it was the threads were there. The teacher was talking, looking at the ruler, and I'm saying, well, when you put a point on a ruler, there's always space on either side of that point, so you can never quite be exact. Oh, what do you think? You know, she just slammed me down, but I think the possibility, thinking in terms of possibility, was always there. So my father died when I was 17, and I really looked at like life and death and what is life and what aspects of life can you save and you can't, and you know, it's the thermal piece you can never keep, but you know, because when someone dies, the heat leaves their body. But when my dog died, it was, you know, it's so painful. And one thing I realized, I learned from the experience, was if I could continue to actively love him, I could still feel my connection to him. So it was still living in that place of loving him. And if I could be there, then it was, it could live on. And so I realized that love has nothing to do with time, place, space. It has to do with a connection that is very much there. And if we can have that, that's where real spirit is. That's where real connection. That's where real love is, and I try to keep that when I can.
You said when your father died that you had a vision of a huge tree tipping over and the roots kind of falling off. So, you know, your spiritual imagination and sense of sort of mystical reality has always been very strong as you've moved through your life. And I just want to kind of repeat what you just said, because I think it's so important as we've studied quantum physics and looked at some of the spiritual realities that it's starting to describe. I have often said love is a field, and fields are ways of traversing time and space and dimension that are very real, and I don't know how, but what you describe is actively loving across space, time, and even the distance of death can make the distance disappear or feel less real than what Francine, as a mystic, is describing as really real, which is that we can still have a relationship and we can still have love. And that seems to be what I would call God, or that seems to be your divine image, your divine concept is really grounded in that. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I do. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
As long as we don't call it God.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about deconstructing and getting to a place where you work through, and I hope you keep working through, so that words don't harm and words don't trigger a trauma response. And that's part of the work that we do in Free Religious Community, is to try to keep working on it, not so that you believe in this or that, but so that you can heal from the trauma, and that particular words and phrases don't activate a terrible fight, flee, freeze, and fawn response. And we're learning a lot about that response, and we'll continue that on November 5th, talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your
Thank you.
honesty, your beautiful resilience, your mystical connection, and your witness for animals and their dignity, and for being you and being part of this community. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being in conversation.
And thank you for keeping a safe space to practice spiritually. Thank you, Vicki, for that.
Thanks to all of us. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.